Mhm.
It's good for us to get into the core of his religion in many ways, that spot of being not just looking at fear, but saying, what do you actually do about it? And how many have some kind of practice where you attempt to come in a better connection to fear? Something that helps you to be able to do that. That's exactly what he's trying to help us to do. And he shows us his practice. What did you think of it? What's the basis of what you thought about his mindfulness practice?
Which one are you talking about?
What he talked about with this power of mindfulness, where he's talking about going into where he says the energy of mindfulness is the Buddha. And if you come from a Christian background, you compare it to the Holy Spirit. But he says you take refuge in that energy of mindfulness. And so you sit and you rest and you draw yourself into a space where you see and feel and don't try to fix as much as what we often do, right? But notice what is around you, right? That power, he says, is inside of you, that you have a safe island to go to, is what he talked about. How do you, go ahead.
That's been really helpful for me recently because, you know, it's just the whole thought of the future and what's going to happen both with me personally and with our country. And just to have that being present to the here and now and being okay right now and taking in what's good around you right now, just doing all of that has been really helpful to me.
Yeah. This stuck in your house, being in social isolation, has in some ways been a forced meditative practice, hasn't it?
Yeah.
We've had to be in a space where you can't be worrying about all that stuff that's out there as much or as easily. And we all have more time of contemplation, more time of reflection, more time, if we take it, to examine many of the issues that he's talking about here. Going back to what is my strength? What is my core? How do I get back to it? Because in the midst of this, there's a lot of ways that we can see that, well, there's, first of all, a lot of things that are outside of our control. I hope you've noticed that. But second of all, there's a lot of stuff where we have an investment that we have to somehow deal with that inside of ourselves. And his thing is you bring that into the energy of God, right? You bring it into the space, that safe space within you, so that it's not just that which is assailing you, coming against you, right? So in the midst of all this, what are some of the things that are assailing you? What is it that you're worried about? What is it that you're trying to struggle with? What is it that you don't know what to do with?
I'm trying to come to grips with the lack of physical contact with my family.
Yeah. Yeah.
We do a lot of FaceTime, a lot, and it's not. It's like I can't reach out and touch on, and I'm not present for my grandson's huge events. They're happening in my absence, as opposed to a year ago from now when I spent the month in Boise with them and with my dog Teddy, who's not here anymore, and all the wonderful things that we did. We had 5 glorious weeks together, all of us, and it was just great. And
Yeah.
you know, that's just not happening. It's not gonna happen,
Right.
and I don't know when it's ever gonna happen again.
Yeah.
So that sort of way out there in the future is what I need to be, just coming back and say, I'm spirit, I'm present. This is what I have right now. It's wonderful. And get centered again and let go of the fear of the future will never be any better. I mean, it's great. The present's pretty wonderful. I mean, I do FaceTime like often, but every day in some way. But anyway.
I was struck though, Elizabeth, with when as you were talking, I was struck with how much that's not dissimilar to what happens when someone dies around us, right? We're used to seeing their face. Like, for example, with Robbie, there she's gone. Yeah. It's not that we're disconnected to her. We can still connect up, but at first what we're missing is what we used to have, right? And maybe this is good rehearsal for all of us as we move into those other events that will come up, right? Where we will lose each other and we'll have to figure out the new norm, right?
And this Robbie's move has been big.
It is a big thing, isn't it? And it definitely is one of those things that is out of our control, right? Probably the right decision for her. But I have to like it.
Oh, but I love it for her, but I don't like it for me.
Yeah, that's right.
You know?
But that's often true about those things that are outside of our control. Is there's things about it that it's not that we would stop it completely, but there's parts of us that would. Part of our makeup, our being, that would say, not for me, this thing, right? But all of those things, he talks about like enjoying the sunset and what gets in the way of us enjoying the sunset. Right now, as I drove to work this morning and looked at the Great Smoky Mountains that we live in, if I didn't know where that smoke came from, it would have been beautiful, right? But knowing the fires that are causing that smoke puts me in a different type of relationship to it. And at least part of what he's talking about is trying to figure out how not to let just the badness of the smoke and the origin of the smoke be all that we see. They are still gorgeous mountains, right? Even with all the smoke. Sharon.
Well, it's interesting that you bring up the fires, because I think right now for me, I mean, there's so many issues that are hard, but those fires, I am just grieving the loss of that beautiful country that we moved to Tucson for, the hikes, and especially as it comes down Ventana and Esperaro and towards Sabino, my beloved, area. And so I've really been struggling with that. But I have to say that reading this book there've been some insights from this that have helped me. And one of them was, last week we had the practices of thinking I'm of a nature to die. And so I've been thinking about, accepting that, the impermanence. And I've also been trying I was watching something on TV and this guy was walking across this area by a lake, and there was this beautiful stone that he was walking on. And he said, the little thing across the bottom of it said, this is some of the oldest exposed rock existing on Earth. And when I saw that, I actually stopped the tape of this show, because it was so profound to me. I got perspective about how old this Earth is and what a little piece of it is my history. And so that was really helpful to me. And then this morning I was thinking about the fires and how resistant I am to these fires, how upset I am by them, and how I don't want them to be there. And I just thought, in the history of the forest, this is a good thing. I mean, in the long history of Earth, this is a natural phenomena. It cleans out the forest and the forest regrows. I mean, that's happened on Earth so many times. And for some reason, I felt great comfort from that. Just that recognition of, again, my small piece in the history of all of this. And was even able to think, like you, Jim, you know, the fire at night is quite beautiful. I mean, the immensity of this is kind of stunning in a weird kind of way. So it is really how you think about it, you know. And for me, to work on being less resistant to the reality that is confronting us gives me peace. Gives me more peace.
26 years ago, or not 26, it was more than that. Sorry, 1984, however many years ago that is, I moved to Arizona, right? So that's 36 years ago. Is that right? Okay. About this time of year. And I move up to Round Valley. Round Valley is in the north central side, the east central side of the state, almost on the New Mexico border. And there's a great big mountain there called Escudilla.
Ah, yes.
And a number of years ago, sometime in my lifetime, but before I moved there to live, a fire swept across that mountain. And you could see from the town I lived in, you could see the scars of that fire. But I always thought it was a beautiful mountain in spite of the scars, because the scars weren't the red, it had just happened, the cut had just, you know, it's still bleeding type of scar. It was the healing of the yellow of the aspens that came in first and that type of thing. And so it's still a gorgeous mountain. It was just different than what some of my friends had remembered it from before that fire. And just recently, another fire swept through there and burnt it again, right? Just a couple years ago. So it's different again. It doesn't mean it's an unbeautiful thing, but I do have to, in the midst of it, readjust myself in relationship to it. Catherine.
Good morning. I'm so glad to be back with all of you. And I was in Montana, and where there's an uncountable number of trees, green trees, and more trees, and water and mountainous. And my son, who I'm exceedingly proud of, like I'm proud of all of them, but my youngest son is a fire manager. They do not use the term firefighter. Firefighters are people that fight fires from stations and with equipment like, you know, fire engines and stuff. People that fight fires in the wilderness are fire managers. My son told me the mountain would probably go again because he said it's on a cycle. It's about a 17-year or so cycle. And because of, you know, the nature of things here in Tucson, you know, buffalo grass and other non-native grasses that have taken hold, that's ready fuel for the flames. It's also because people insist on building where they don't belong in some senses, and these people that want to be up in the foothills and have commanding views and stuff choose not to, in some instances, build fire breaks or a fire perimeter around their homes. So I really would submit that I get kind of exercise when people start mouthing off, and I'm not talking about this group today, but I mean people in the paper, and why don't the fire people do this, that, and the other? Well, they're talking from vast ignorance. There's so many factors about managing a large fire like this has grown to be. And there's an incident commander who has the overall responsibility, and then there's people contained within that. There's about 6 other people that are kind of like a cabinet, and they have delegated responsibilities, and they work together. They talk to one another. Somebody liaisons with things like the fire departments locally that are helping out, and with the sheriff's department, etc. It's pretty marvelous, really. The whole point being, this is much better managed, and it's being managed very appropriately from what I can gather. And it will burn out because in some areas it's got no more fuel or very little left. And so this has to happen. It's nature's correction. So just enough about that, but I just would like to reassure everyone that everything is under control in some form or fashion.
The hard part about it is that it's not under my control.
Right. Well, you could pray, you know. I'm just saying, lovingly.
What was really interesting to me as I was watching this last week, as it was as those fires were sweeping down Ventana Canyon and now down, down towards Sabino.
Yeah.
It's scary to me, but I heard this thing that I go, that can't be true. I hope it's true, but that can't be true, is it? Because that it was, and I didn't hear the whole thing, but it was basically about how it burns down, but the mountain itself, the way as it burns down lower, the fuel essentially extinguishes the fire, and it doesn't look like that's going to happen, and I got to trust that these fire managers know how to manage that fire, because it doesn't look like it to me.
Yeah. Well, it's a science, and that's what we need to understand, is what we know about fire now is so much more vast than even 25 or 50 years ago, and the philosophy around fires has really changed over time, because we've got to meet these super fires that are, coming upon us. And I think that's the key.
You are already doing.
Go ahead.
Well, so I think, I think it's just to learn more. And if you listen to the morning briefings, and I've been following things from afar because I really am very, very interested in the fire thing. And of course, my son has fought fires before in this area. When he was living here, he's fought fires in different parts of the country and up, in different parts of Arizona and so forth. And there's so much to know about fire. It's incredible. But these people are great. They're good. My son knows some of the people that have been fighting the fire from various places. And he said they're the best. They're really good. They're really good. And there's 900 people plus that are fighting this fire for us and managing it.
So what do we specifically do about all of this is the question. Not necessarily about the fire, but all the other stuff. You might notice that there's a few other things out of your control in our world right now. So I want to read a quote from the middle of it, and it's a quote that I kind of stuck together over a couple of different pages, and it goes like this. Sometimes an emotion or feeling or fire comes up that prevents us from enjoying what's happening in the here and now. We are blocked by our worries, our fear, and our anger, and the beauty of the sunrise cannot really enter us. What should we do in these circumstances? We think we have to remove that feeling or emotion to be free again, so the beautiful sunrise can penetrate us. But worry and fire is a part of you, and that's why when your worry comes up, you have to know how to handle it tenderly and peacefully. That's what this whole chapter is about. How do we take this thing which feels so against me and somehow bring it in and treat it tenderly and peacefully in some way or another? That's
I liked
mindful.
his analogy of the baby. Your anger and your fear could be your baby. You wouldn't throw it out the window, and you wouldn't be violent towards it.
That's
You
right.
would just see what it has to say to you, smile at it, embrace it tenderly. The analogy worked for me.
Yeah, I agree with you. That was a great analogy. How do we treat this as a part of us that we love, even though right now we don't like the poopy pants that we're going to have to, right? Doris.
Now, okay, we have a situation right now with our older daughter, and Liz knows some of the background on this. She had a very tumultuous divorce 4 years ago, and some stuff has come up about her ex and her children that's just thrown her back into that terrible, tumultuous time of 4 years ago. And it's really hard to know what to do. I mean, basically, I can't help her. She has to figure out how to deal with this worry and tumult herself. But I'm her mom, and she calls and talks to me for long periods of time about her emotional stress, and I can't do anything. So I have to find a way to deal with my own worry about it without getting angry at her for, you know, being mean all the time, because none of her family has an answer to her situation, which has no answer. So, you know,
Yeah.
so we've been struggling with that the last couple of days, of how to find that peace within ourselves when, you know, the world around is kind of not very peaceful.
My granddaddy had a saying where he'd say, for every worry under the sun, either there's a solution or there ain't one. If there's a solution, hurry and find it. If there ain't one, never mind it. And that's at least part of that mindfulness thing. You bring it into yourself, and there's some things that we can do, right? I can make sure that I don't drive up onto the top of the mountain right now, so my car is at risk, right? But there's a whole lot I can't do, and so I have to have the mindfulness to hold it, but not hold it with the tension of all the stuff that I want to hold it with, because that's not helpful to me or to fixing the fire, right? Or with your daughter, there's things that you cannot do there. So you hold in love what you can hold, and you let go of all the worries of what you can't do. Catherine.
Well, I'm struck by several things, and I think parents we always feel the pain of our children's lives, and the further pain that we can't fix it anymore by hugs and kisses and reassurances, except maybe mentally. My sense is, and it's not from me, I think it's part of what I keep studying, and it says things come up for healing. So maybe the emphasis is it's coming up because there is some things that are not healed and are holding the family in general back from moving forward. So there's that. And the serenity prayer, it's more of the same, in the same genre of what you were talking about. I like your granddaddy's. I've never heard that before, and I think that's a good one. But it's also the serenity prayer. What can I do, and what isn't mine to do? That's where you gain your peace then, is from knowledge, sure knowledge of what's yours, what's not yours, and whether you can or cannot affect a change on it.
Well, and I think it helps in a situation like this to think of ourselves in our larger sense, not Jim the me right here, but Jim who embraces the firefighters too. And this personification of me can't fix the fires, but those fire managers, they're taking care of what is larger than mine, and to trust that larger self. And that's hard to do, because like you say, what you want to do is mother that child, take care of that child, give a hug, and that may not be what's necessary right now.
Well, and then I'll be quiet. I'm struck by what the bishop said on that Sunday, and when he spoke to all of us, and I loved it so much that he said, this is a reset for the world. This is a reset. And so I think that within the larger reset that's going on, I'm getting the goosebumps here, we have individual resets, and we have resets occurring closer to home as well. And so I invite and encourage all of us to consider all the resets that are going on simultaneously.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But to do that best, we have to go back to the word that is the topic of this chapter, mindfulness. Am I truly just in that space where I'm very mindful of all this stuff? Because when it comes down to it, I know that some of the things I want to reset, or maybe that's people I want to reset. Right? But am I mindful enough to really be aware of all that is, all of the things that I personally can have an effect on and can reset, not all those things that I want to, that draw my attention away. Am I being very mindful about what to do to reset well? So, you know, I've talked to you before about like the conversations with my cousin, and from my cousin, it goes to his cousin, whose name is Dean. And so that conversation is now extended to a guy named Ettore, and I have no idea who he is, right? But we've been, the last couple of days, in the most wonderful, meaningful conversation about things around the police issues, right? And so all of that conversation, which was less than helpful, brought me to a really good and a deep conversation with someone I would have never gotten in contact with otherwise. And it was a good reset, right? But a lot of that takes being present in the conversation and letting it lead you to that which will be most meaningful, both for yourself and for the other person. And in those kind of conversations, I don't know about you, but I do a lot of not being mindful because I got the right answer already. And they obviously don't. And so I'm so busy fixing them. I'm so busy doing something that may not be as much of the divine calling in my life. How do I go back to the present moment of what right now is calling into me? What distracts you from all that? What makes it so that you're not in that type of place? What is the anxiety, the fear, the worry that keeps you away from being in that better space? That's the type of question that we need to think of on a regular basis, but it also helps if we share some of those things with each other, partially so that I can say, oh, good, Elizabeth has the same fear that I do, right? Or Joyce is worried about some of the same things that I'm worried about, so that I feel some sense of community, right? And that I'm not alone in those things, but also so that I begin to look at it and see that it's not, no matter how valid that fear is, that I don't have to deal with it just alone. That it's that larger community that is somehow out there and part of that worrying, part of that taking care of. So name one or two of your fears or worries or concerns right now. What are some of them?
How do I get the food that I want without going into a grocery store?
Sure, right?
That's true.
How do we do normal life without exposing ourselves to what is dangerous, right? What else?
Our granddaughters are on a trip and their engine blew up and they're on the way to Minnesota. They're now in Bozeman, Montana.
Yeah.
And their mom is going to have to go from Minnesota with a tow and pick up the car and bring it back. It's just so much.
Yeah.
For them. And
Yeah.
I feel so powerless to do anything.
Yeah. What else? Sharon, you look like you had something.
You know, I think I shared I had a root canal and I had a tooth break, and then I had something go wrong with an eye issue, and I've had to go to these doctor's offices, which I would not choose to do during this time.
Yeah.
And, you know, that's a fear that's in the back of your mind of these exposures that I'm having to have, you know, during this time.
Yep. All those things that would be just normal most of our life, suddenly we're in a different space. Yes, Nancy.
I'm afraid that we're not going to be able to come to Arizona next winter.
Yeah. What has this changed permanently in some ways?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
my daughter who lives in Virginia and we've been planning to go to, or my daughter up in Boise, Idaho for Christmas and be all together. And, you know, I have a fear it's not going to happen. We've been talking about it and planning it for a long time. And I'm doing a lot better about not obsessing about it now. I think doing this class, doing the readings and my meditations, helping me be focusing on the present and how wonderful the present is, and just being present, the present, and doing what's.
Yeah, and I think that the one little prayer that he had in this section was just that: breathe in, I know the anxiety that is in me. Breathing out, I smile to my anxiety. Right? Not necessarily saying, okay, anxiety, you're okay, or fear isn't real, but I smile and I see it in a better sense than just the worry and everything that I have about it. Right? And so we just take the time to breathe in and out to try to recenter us into this present moment, recenter us into something better to deal with that. In the second chapter, that chapter called Learning to Stop, he goes even a little bit further along those lines, doesn't he? To try to help us to figure out how to let go mentally, how to let go physically, how to spiritually put ourselves into some new space. And he starts off that chapter by saying, we've learned genetically, we've gotten a lot passed down that tells us that we do have to worry. We've developed habits of running from, fleeing, fighting, all of those types of things being carried away by the stuff that assails us, right? And part of being in the present moment is stopping and saying, do I have to react according to that? Is that what is needed today in this moment? And I think that's always a great question, because I think one of the interesting things about America is that in some ways we are fearful, but we're not fearful. I don't think we have the huge fears. Like when I go down to Peru, for example, these are people who may not have food tomorrow, right? That's a real fear. As a general rule, that's not our fear, is it? These are people who don't have all the things that they need. And so they're wondering, where will that which I need come from? As a general rule, that life or death type of fear is not ours. So I think in some ways, what we're fearful about are relatively smaller, not life or death things. And yet for us, they feel like that. And we're magnifying these fears in ways. And I definitely see that as I talk to Bob and Dean and Ettore. I see some of that, which from my perspective seems very clear. That's not really as big a concern as what you think it is. And yet it makes me have to wonder, are they saying the same thing back to me? What is it that I'm concerned about that maybe I need to put in a different perspective and hear and see differently than just what is being told to me right now? That's what happens in this learning to stop. How do I stop the story within me and go back to something which will give me a different perspective? So he talks about the wonders of the present moment. And how many know, like his assertion says, that we still have maybe 80% is good. And for most of us, much of the time, it's maybe even more than that, right? How many have a whole lot of good in your life right now? Me too. And how many forget that sometimes? Me too. Because it's easy. In the midst of a fire burning at night, it takes my attention and makes me forget that a couple seconds later, I'm going to walk back into my house and lay down in a nice soft bed and rest well. And I forget all of that that's good because that fire takes my attention. So let's rehearse some of those good things. What are those 80% of good that you have around you?
I have a garden.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What else?
I have a new puppy.
Absolutely.
Yes.
What else?
I have a house and food and stable income. And, you know, my basic needs are all taken care of.
Yep. There's a whole lot of stuff that we don't have to worry about at all, huh, Doris? Because it's there.
And I have hope for the future, for the country, or here, Tucson. I have hope for the future.
Yeah.
Yeah, in traveling, I found there's so much kindness out there that it blows me away sometimes. I missed my plane on Monday because I just wasn't quite ready to travel, and there was another story behind it that I needed to be home for a reason, and sort of another thing that my granddaughter fell off a horse recently and broke her collarbone, and she had to get a plate in her neck and stuff, and that was on Tuesday morning in Kalispell. And so I flew in on Tuesday. I decided not to beat myself up for being human, and I was ready Tuesday because I was already packed and I'd done the dress rehearsal the day before.
Mm-hmm.
And Tuesday, when I, from start to finish, if there was just help along the way, cheerful people. I just love Delta. I flew on Delta. I'm pushing them. Vote for Delta. Go and buy some stock. I mean, seriously, they know what they're doing. So respectful, so loving, so on top of quarantining us, insisting before you get on the plane, if you didn't bring a mask, you got to put it on and wear it in the plane, separated from other people. But everywhere along the way, something good was happening, and I found help when I didn't even have to ask for it. That's the most amazing thing. Somebody put my suitcase up, and when I got off, the man wasn't even asked, and he just automatically took it down for me. And I found all the way along that I was being really loved, and it's quite profound to have that happen and to feel it, because it's there.
Yeah.
I really respond to that, Catherine, because I have to say, in these incidents, like going to have a root canal, these women they were all women that were helping me with this. You know, they're garbed in these face masks and shields, and their hair covered, and they took every precaution, and they're digging around in my mouth and concerned about my well-being. I mean, it is pretty overwhelming, the kindness that is coming. And then I've been watching these the fire manager updates, and have been so impressed with these people, just their calm demeanor, their reassurance, their knowledge of managing a big fire. And it helps me to understand that, you know, the fact that it's not being contained more quickly every day is because they can't contain it where it is right now. It's in an area that is unsafe for fire personnel to be on the ground. They're having to set it a further perimeter. And I mean, just everywhere you look, if you're looking right now, people are making great effort on our behalf. And
it's counterintuitive for us to hear this, but I'm going to say it. The fire has to come to the fire managers sometimes. It has to be fought or managed in a spot where you can get people and resources in order to control it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a hard concept for people, but you don't know how rugged the terrain is up there. unless you've walked it sometimes, or I flew in Monday afternoon, and the brown around Tucson was mind-boggling, and I really got a sense of it in a whole nother perspective to fly in and see that. It was also, I've had a lot of profound experiences recently, but they do know what they're doing. They're well trained. They take classes. It is a science. It really is a science, and so many variables that have to be considered. And that's why there's a manager who's got a lot of support from these other people and they talk to each other. The communication is good. And what you don't know is, and maybe you heard, when somebody is committed to a team, it's for 14 days. And then they have to mandatorily rotate off, and a new team takes over. And that's just what was occurring. And they hand it off, and there's very good communication about everything between the people that are leaving to go home and rest for a few days and then be sent somewhere else, to the people that are fresh and everything and coming on board. It's like the military in that it's got rules and regs and a matrix that they operate under. And it's quite fantastic. The more you know about it, the more I feel confident and feel good about what's happening here. The better I feel, the more I know.
You know, I think that the media has done an outstanding job in explaining so much of this here with this fire. I've learned so much about all the things you've just been talking about, Catherine. And it's reassuring to have a handle on why it is the way it is and what the possibilities are and how they work to control those. And it's been really an education and really heartwarming to see the care that's being given to handling this fire at all kinds of levels. So, yeah, it's been good.
Right after the author talks about the 80% positive things, he says these words: so don't run, come back to the present moment. And I think in many ways, that's exactly what we're talking about here. Do I trust the present moment and the personnel around me that are in charge of something that I can't control? Do I trust this present moment and be here in this time, not running away from all of that that's there? So, for example, with my cousin Bob, do I trust that Holy Spirit is there with him? And that's a big if some days for me. Right? Isn't it for you with some of yours? But if I come back to myself, if I come back to this moment, if I come back to the larger picture, then I remember that I don't have to fix perfectly all of that. And I can relax into that divine spiritual flow that's out there doing all of those things. But it means that I have to tap into that which reminds me again and again. Thich Nhat Hanh, it's the joy of meditation. And he calls that sometimes our daily food. And the problem is any kind of a stressful situation sometimes takes us away from that daily food. So for example, right now, I'm not running like I usually do because the smoke is really messing with my respiratory system, and I don't want to go out and breathe it for 3 miles or 4 miles, right? But that is part of how I get my spiritual food, how I center myself, how I meditate. And so it's kind of like, what do I do to replace that with something else? How is all of this turmoil, this stuff that I can't control, how does it take me away from that which will bring me back to my center?
I love his challenge to pay attention to these anxieties and stresses, and I think, you know, my pattern, my habit is to distract myself from those kind of feelings, and I'm still, you know, tempted to do that, watch TV or read, you know, do something so that I'm not like looking tenderly at these anxieties. But this time, for me, it has taken away so many distractions. Like you're talking about your running. I mean, all the things that I do to distract myself, a lot of them are gone right now.
Yeah.
And so it really is an opportunity to grapple with this. You know, we've got this kind of double whammy where we've got more anxieties in our face and also time when we're looking at those anxieties. So it's a perfect opportunity to practice, you know, what he's calling us to. So
Sure.
I guess that's a good thing.
It's a perfect opportunity if we take it as the opportunity. Because it's also the perfect opportunity to spiral worse and worse in our spiritual journey. If we allow that to be how we go, right? So we have to figure out how to use this in the best, most amazing sense, both individually and corporately. I tell you about Ettore because that to me is a huge thing. Here's a man that I might have just argued with a couple of weeks ago, that suddenly we're in a deep conversation. And some of those places where you might have been struggling with something around you, this might be a space to not fix it, but heal some of the damage, heal some of the broken ways that you were walking with it. And it starts, go ahead.
So I was talking with Doris a little bit about how polarized our country is in terms of how people are so clearly on one side or the other with seeming no overlap on so many issues. I'm thinking that the struggle, I think, is maybe with what you just experienced. How do we connect? Because everything's focused on these issues of disagreement, yet probably like is 80% positive. There's probably 80% of our lives that where we share concerns and agreement, and yet everything is boiled down to the areas of disagreement, and they're not important areas. They're things that I get very upset that and experience outrage about how can people think this way. But to start there takes away any possibility of bridging that and getting to the 80% to start with, which might form a basis to deal with the 20%.
And what he talks about at the end of the second chapter we were reading about learning to stop is really important. And it goes back to where Sharon was at. We know that other people are impermanent, right? And yet what I try to do is I try to make them permanently good, just like me, right? But instead, what he kind of tells us to do is know that it's not about them. They'll soon be gone. And so you can look at yourself. How do you have an understanding of your own role in this moment? What can you do about you to react to the moment differently, better than that? And we all almost naturally try to fix whatever it is, whoever it is, that's the problem. But what if we just come back in every moment, be here in this moment, working on this strand of what's really truly within us and in our control, instead of all that's not. That's mindfulness. That's bringing ourselves back to that which is closest, as opposed to all that which is relatively flittery and out of control, and coming back to this moment. It's not simple, because we're all easily taken away, Like if you've tried to do a good meditative practice, you know how much you're like Julia Roberts when she, in that movie Eat, Pray, Love, where she went everywhere and did every kind of, you know, stuff as she's trying to meditate and realized that it had only been 30 seconds that she'd meditated. Right? We have to just keep trying to, I love when he says, you don't need to force the water to enter the mung beans. Right? You put the mung beans in the water. You sit in that space where you don't have to fix everything. You just be in that space where you're trying to do one thing.
Yeah, the whole issue of how to be a good friend and sort of maintain a balance in life, and how to remember that you want to be a good friend as opposed to being busy with life and ignoring the friend.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's painful.
Yeah.
Because what can happen is what happened with me with Robbie is that suddenly she's very ill and she's leaving, and I don't get the chance to be with her and try to clear up, you know, whatever, you always have residual stuff.
Yeah.
And there's no chance to do that.
Yeah. But you know, the issue always, Elizabeth, that I see as I deal with people in death moments, as they're saying goodbye to loved ones, is always the residual, whatever the I wish I had. You know, all those things like that they didn't do in the present moment that was before them a couple days ago, and now they can't.
Missed the chance.
Or at least they can't in the same way. And so at least that's part of what it is. One of the reasons I'm glad we were able to do that drive-by goodbye is so everyone could have that last moment of saying whatever it is they wanted to say to Robbie.
Yeah.
Right?
Because we'll always think of the things where we missed the mark as opposed to all the ways in which we were great friends, you know, or great moms or whatever. Yeah. We focus on where we were less than.
But the other thing is this, and I think Robbie's a good example. Where is it that I'm holding on to? I want to talk to Robbie like I did 2 months ago. Right? And all of this makes it so we can't. Right? So we have to figure out how to talk to Robbie where she is right now. Or to Grandma, who passed already. Right? We can't talk to Grandma the same way because she's gone. It doesn't mean I can't. If I had some residual with Grandma, I can still be there present, but not in the same way. And I have to figure out how to allow this moment here and now to be the way I try to do it, instead of longing for what I wish would have been or what I'm trying to make happen. I got to live in this moment with this issue, this person. And that's hard for all of us, isn't it? And yet that's the nature of good spiritual life, is trying to do that. So for you, as you go through your spiritual practices, what do you have that allows you to do all of that, and what's missing? Where is it that you wish today you could go out and run 3 miles because you need whatever peace that brings to you, but you don't because of the fire? And what do you replace it with? Today, how are you being spiritually aware in ways that are maybe different than what you would have a few months ago, because you can't do what you were doing a few months ago? I'd rather see all of you guys in person. But I love that we get together in this type of a setting, because it gives us a wonderful moment of spirituality, even though I think that I still want all of that other, right? But if I'm so busy longing for that other, I miss the wonder of what can happen right here. So what practices are you trying to do differently than before, or better?
Well, I spoke earlier about I am trying to be more accepting of reality, less resistant, and getting back to my daily meditation more regularly. This has really challenged me on that. Just to, if you want to have a new pattern in your life, you have to practice it. And so I'm, more motivated to practice.
Good. Anyone else?
I think I'm more motivated to try to see the good parts in my life, to make a conscious effort to look for those. I've started, when I go out for a walk in the morning, to look for things that are beautiful, a flower, the way someone's done their yard, whatever, just to bring some of that goodness back into when I feel overwhelmed with things that aren't so good, to remind myself of the 80%.
And that's a huge thing. Thank you, Doris.
I've been able, I'm pretty darned independent, and I always have been, and I've really had pride about that. I'm here to tell you. And what I am doing is being willing to ask for help and or to accept help that's offered to me. And that's an interesting place to be, and I'm liking it. It's a little awkward at times, but nevertheless, I see the value of that.
And
Boy,
Catherine,
do I relate.
you're quite a bit younger than some of the people on this call, and so you may not know that that's just going to increase as you go forward.
Well, I'm older than I appear to be, but I don't act my age because I don't know how I'm supposed to act at this age.
But like you say, that's not a bad thing. It just feels like it because we tell each other the lie about it's better to give than it is to receive. But receiving is as much a spiritual practice as what giving is. I mean, and they're really tied to each other, because if nobody receives, none of us can give either. And so we really need both of those. So, Ed, did I see you trying to talk?
Oh, I seem to be moving more in what Thich Nhat Hanh would call detachment, where I'm trying to let go of some of my obsessions and some of my goals, some of the things I would like to have and such. And I'm sitting back and I'm really thinking, they're no big deal. That's not really going to make me happy. I would enjoy it, but it's not a big thing. I've got plenty to enjoy without that.
Thank you. All right, so as you go forth this week, as you go into the life, whatever it's bringing to you, try to do it with a lot of mindfulness of the here and now. Try not to say when this is over, or I wish we could get back to, but be here. Because right here, there's a lot of wonder. And not just the 80% wonder of what's good, but right here, something's being discovered. Something's being born in this moment. And I think this is going to draw us into a place that we have forgotten we need to be in. It's going to bring us back to it. And I don't mean bring us back to something we've only had, but also bring us forward to something all at once. It's going to be something great. We just don't know what it is yet. So be in this moment of birth, okay?
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Jim, I wanted to let you know, I have invited some people to come to the new class that you're starting tomorrow
Oh, good.
on racism. I don't know if they're going to come or not, but they said they were interested. So
Okay, good. I want to remind all of you once again too of the thing I put up at the beginning about Dar Lundin too. So if you missed that, Dar passed away on the 4th, and so Melissa sent out a thing to us about a service for him, and love to have you be part of that service. Here's what this is his obituary. I'll leave it up for a couple minutes so that you can have it to look at. But Melissa shared the link for this as well. So if you didn't know about that, just know that we'll have a celebration for his life on Zoom on Saturday.
And
All right,
for those of you who didn't know Dar, Dar and Betty were our winter visitors from Minnesota, and Betty was a retired UMC elder, and they were so active in reconciling. Just amazing people.
Yeah, amazing man, amazing couple.
Yeah, and Betty died unexpectedly a few years ago, and Dar now.
And if you get Melissa's emails, there should be a link to this on there. And at the bottom, that's the link that you're going to use to get to the Zoom meeting if you want to. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you guys.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.
Do I need to write it down?
No, you should be able to look at the email Melissa sent and be able to get all this.
Okay.
The link itself, Ed, looks something like this.
Okay.
I don't know where it's at. It looks like this. Okay. And down at the bottom, there's a link here that click here for Dar's obituary and more information. And that will bring up this thing. Okay.
Got it. Okay.
Thank you.